what do you think about enlightenment itself? Is our purpose here actually to do with enlightenment, or is it sort of merging the divine being with the human being?
I think ultimately that's a highly individual question, and each person has to answer that for themselves, and it also depends on how deep one genuinely feels like they want to go into what you would call enlightenment. For the majority of people, I would definitely say what's most relevant at this timing in our planetary evolution as a species, as a collective consciousness, so to speak, as a collective being, is to have a certain degree of, call it enlightenment or awakening, to have that be integrated to a certain extent. But for most people, it's not the goal to go all the way with that, to reach some kind of an end stage. People want to feel better. People want to know who they are more clearly. They want to, and kind of need to, find the stability within that never changes, something that they can rely on within these chaotic times, both externally and internally. So I think for the majority of people, enlightenment is only relevant in a sort of pacified way, like pacified enlightenment. And I don't mean that negatively per se, I just mean that the time of coming together and really going in depth and realizing ourselves and truly transcending any type of identification with the body and the mind, although possible, it's not what the majority at this timing is interested in, and that's okay. That's the evolution of our species at this timing. What is more relevant for the majority seems to be to at least have a certain level of enlightenment, to understand that we are not the bodies ultimately. We cannot ultimately die. We actually are consciousness within which there is this co-agreed game happening, this play happening that we call the game of creation, the game of the illusion, the great illusion, if you will. The tricky part is that even if people have a certain level of this awareness, but it is not maintained or integrated enough, it inevitably will fade into the background. But even at that stage, even at that level of integration where it's not completely integrated, where we still identify with being a person, so to speak, where we still identify as the human being, even though we've had moments where we see that it's not the truth, it will still give us a background conviction from which we can act. It still gives us a background stability and confidence and empowerment that will allow our personal lives, our individuated lives, to express themselves more fully, with less fear, with greater integrity and more transparency. So it really depends on who you ask in terms of how relevant enlightenment is and to what degree someone wants to be established in that. It is possible to go all the way and to never suffer again, not even for a second. That's possible, but it requires one to be really, really committed and earnest, and it requires a complete shift in perspective of what we are attached to. So it's possible, but it's not relevant for the majority of humanity. What's more relevant, again, is to have a basic awareness of things beyond the body and the mind, an understanding of consciousness. The most important one probably being getting people familiar with the fact that this consciousness that they are is always already here. There's something in you or about you that hears my voice right now without you having to put any effort in. Even if you were completely distracted, that's something that's always here, would still register my voice even if you're not listening. So every time we take a 2 to 5 second break from our mind stream and we drop into the space of I exist, I am aware, there's a sense of consciousness and vividness, lucidity and beingness here. That really is the entrance into any sort of stage or state of enlightenment, is to exit the mind stream or to pause the mind stream as much as we can for short moments so that we can, it's kind of like parting the clouds and seeing the sun and being reinvigorated. But we can do this with our soul. Like we can part the clouds of our mind so that the natural effulgent, shining self can shine through, the greater self can shine through. Now, the more we take these moments, the more familiar we become with them, and then we can empower ourselves as individuals. That's what's relevant for most people, to sort of the empowerment path, but with a basic understanding of enlightenment, I'd say.
That was a fantastic answer.
Well, thank you.
So when it comes to what you're talking about, so the actual parting of the clouds, or sort of, the language I would use would be disidentifying from thought and from emotion. What would you suggest to somebody who might be listening to this? The difference is between disidentifying from thought and emotion, and actually using your emotions to guide you. Because there's sort of this duality of emotion. Sometimes we'll have the experience of having strong emotion come up that might be negative, and that might be guiding us in a certain way. But maybe the beliefs or the thoughts that are creating that emotional response aren't necessarily the truth at that time. So how do we what's the difference to you between following our emotion and using that as a tool, and actually disidentifying from the emotion itself, and when should each one be applied?
Nice. When the emotional body, let's call it that, when the emotional body is cluttered and clouded, one will not be able to tell clearly what the guidance mechanism is telling us. But originally, from a clean space, the emotions are actually telling us what is true and what's not true, so to speak, or what our higher self agrees with and what our higher self does not agree with. And it still does so when it's cluttered. It's just that we're so mental, and we're so descriptive in our minds, and we're so wrapped up in a world of words and labels and identities. That's why enlightenment is so helpful, to clean the slate, to get clear, to be the clarity that's here and now over and over again until it becomes more and more integrated and natural. But if there is a certain level of clarity, we can start to understand that the emotions, if they feel bad, it's very simple. If they feel bad, if we feel bad, if the emotional body feels bad, it means that something is out of alignment within our thinking or belief system. It's that simple. When we feel really good, when we feel really empowered and free and supported, our way of thinking is supported. It's quite literally our true or deeper higher self vibrationally agreeing with the vibration of the thought or the perspective. Everything has a vibration, so to speak. Everything is a frequency, a wavelength, if you will. So if the wavelength of our thinking is vibrationally synced up with what our higher or true selves that's already here is truly all about, then we'll feel good and empowered. But if we start thinking against that alignment, we will feel it in the terms of the negative emotions. And here's the thing to watch for. The only thing that ever causes emotional suffering is a belief in lack of any kind. Not just, I'm not even talking like material lack, or like I don't have what I want, but
Lack of love, maybe, or
lack of love, lack of worthiness, lack of existence. If you think of fear of death, it's simply, oh, I can lack existing. We feel fear, we feel negative emotion, because higher self vibrationally is letting us know, hey, that thought does not match with the truth of existence. So there's always, every time we have even a slight tension, there's a lack belief. It's the only cause of emotional suffering that I've found. Everything I've experienced in my introspection for years, it all leads back to some kind of a thought lack understanding. So if we can watch for these, and we can identify them and see the ridiculous nature of these beliefs, and see that we picked them up along the way and that we didn't have them when we were a year and a half old in our crib, just aware of being, not having the words to describe our experience, then we can release a lot of that emotional suffering, and it can become lighter and brighter and more empowered and more awakened. And so then the emotions can be clearly used as an emotional guidance system, because we'll know, oh, wait, I feel bad, but we need to, as soon as we feel bad, what we tend to do is we externalize that, almost automatically.
And blame it on the external world.
We put blame on it. Yeah. We appoint a cause outside of the thoughts. We think that somehow it has something to do with physical reality, and it never, ever, 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 ever has anything whatsoever to do with the circumstances, ever. Because
external reality is always sort of the reflection of the internal, right?
Correct, and it actually doesn't exist in the way that we think it does. It actually is an illusion. Now, you might have to go really deep into enlightenment to really experientially get this, but maybe just assume that that's the case for now, that actually what we are experiencing physically is ultimately a dream happening in consciousness.
And,
you will, yeah.
And is this sort of like, just to, to explain this to maybe the average person that might be listening to
Okay.
this, would this maybe be something along the lines of like, there's certain studies in quantum mechanics that describes how particles behave both like waves and particles depending on how consciousness is interacting with them? Is that something that somebody could sort of use to understand that statement? Because that's a very complex statement.
Correct. In fact, there are no particles. That is part of the illusion too. But in terms of that symbolism, you could say that there are only waves, and it constantly crystallizes itself according to what you expect to see, according to what has been agreed upon at deeper levels of your consciousness, or more service levels of your consciousness. Yeah. So, but literally, if one was to investigate their direct experience, we would see that we've never ever experienced a circumstance before. We've never actually experienced a circumstance. We've only ever experienced how we feel about the circumstance. We can only experience our state of being. We've never experienced the outside world. Yeah. We just experienced our thoughts about the outside world, our feelings about the outside world, but we've never actually experienced an object, only how we experience that experience. We've only ever experienced experience. Wow. The existence, the objective existence of an external world has yet to be proven, and scientists can't figure it out because it's not there. It is a dream within consciousness. Wow. But anyways, what this can show us that as soon as we have a negative emotion, the only place to look is within. Yes. The only thing to check in with is, what must I believe is true in order to have this emotion? No response. I must have a belief. Because if I asked you what you feel about the doorknob in your room, you'd be, well, nothing. But the doorknob is there just as much as your mother not feeling well, or your partner shouting at you. It's just as present within the illusion as the doorknob. But you don't feel anything about the doorknob because you have no beliefs about the doorknob. If you could experience circumstances objectively, you would always be aware of the doorknob. But you're not. You're only aware of what you have defined in a certain way. And especially if we define something negatively, we will be reminded of that object over and over again because we've given it value and meaning. Weight, almost, right? Sorry?
So, given it almost weight, in a sense.
Right? Exactly, like yes.
You put a lot of emotion into that if you've held on to something and defined it negatively. So,
yes.
So what would you say for somebody who's experiencing, let's say they're in a place in their life where they're stuck, and maybe they are... they've given a lot of negative emotional meaning, or assigned a lot of negative emotional meaning to a lot of different things within their reality. Now, you are saying that it's coming from within. What advice might you give somebody to create change in that area, especially if they're coming from a heavy space to begin with?
If they're not seeking for total relief of suffering, if they're just looking to enhance or change or improve their experience, I would say, you see, it's very hard to do without any degree of enlightenment. If we're completely stuck in our identities, in our sense of self, and we don't see that we are, and our inner experience is ridden and filled to the brim with lack beliefs, compounding lack beliefs, it's very difficult to break free from them unless we're open to at least some level of perceiving who we are differently. So what's required to break free of anything, first of all, is a break from the old habit. So how do you break from the old habit? That's not too difficult. All we really need to do is understand, first of all, that we generate our own, let's just say, inner experience. It also includes the outer experience, but maybe not everyone believes it that's listening to that. So let's just say inner experience. I think a lot of people can agree with the fact that based on what we think and how we perceive life, that's how we feel about it. So that's the first understanding that, oh wait, I actually generate how I feel. Second, since that's the case, I'm in charge, ultimately. I'm in control of how I feel, and I can actually pause my definition. I can take a break. I can have a little bit of distance from my negative thinking and see that these negative thoughts come and go, and that I am here as the consciousness that's witnessing them clearly. So I have freedom, because I can go with the thought, I can indulge it and believe in it, or I can just sort of allow it to be there and maybe disappear or come and go, but not identify with it as much. Now from that space, we have already shifted who we are. We've already shifted our vibration, and we're already in a, what I would call a parallel reality version of ourselves, which has a different circumstance and a different reality, whether we realize that initially or not.
Because in that moment, when we change, it affects the sort of superposition of the past and the present, right?
Exactly, because past and future are actually generated now. They're actually generated from the present. We don't realize this, but look into
inner child work, for example, are really powerful, right?
Yes, for sure. Yeah. So when we've taken this space and we realize that our perceptions generate how we feel, not the outside world, because as long as we believe the outside world is causing our feelings, we're stuck. We can't do anything, because we're literally giving away the power of changing ourselves to something that's not in our control, seemingly.
Yeah. And it's also, if you're giving it back to outside of you, but outside of you is an illusion anyways, then you're sort of recreating this cycle, it seems like.
Correct. Yes. And so yeah, it's like looking into a mirror and trying to change the way you look by trying to fix the mirror. You know, it just doesn't work. Like, you can't change the image in the mirror. You can only just change how you feel and how you look here. So you gotta smile first before the reflection can smile back. Anyway, so when we know that we are in charge of how we feel, and we've taken a little break, usually I say take 2 to 5 seconds, take a deep breath, give up, relax the body and give up the mind as much as you can. Just give up any ideas of tension that are in your mind, just for a few seconds. And that's the parting of the clouds and the ability to acknowledge the sky, the clear sky and the sunlight. So we notice that we still exist without that thought. And we notice a calming effect on our emotional state, because we're not as wrapped up in the thoughts. And as a result, we can now insert a change. We can now start to investigate and observe, what am I believing about this or about myself or about life that is causing me to have these thoughts with these types of circumstances or appearances? Why do I get triggered in this way? I must have a belief in order to feel this way about what just happened. Yes. I must, otherwise I wouldn't feel that way. If I'm asleep, I don't feel it.
Yes. So, sorry, go ahead.
Well, so then, and from that space, usually the belief starts to become more conscious. We start to see, oh, wait a second, I was upset because this person didn't like the way that I expressed myself. And I remember when I used to express myself, really, my dad used to, you know, whatever, punch me in the face or like punish me for it. So I have the belief that if I express myself and people don't like how I or what I express about myself, then there is a consequence of not being loved there. And just to bring awareness to that lack belief allows it to be identified, and from evolving the way that we think and the concepts of how the universe works and how worthy we actually are, that we gain access to as we grow spiritually, as we evolve. We now have a different context to put this lack belief inside of, so to speak, or to compare with. So on the one hand, now we have the lack belief. Oh, wait a second, I believe I'm unworthy if I express something and it's not received well on the other end. But now from this new context that we've developed, this more holistic view of life, we can see that, wait a second, I exist, therefore I'm part of existence, therefore the absolute authority, which is existence itself, must want me here. Somehow, there must be purpose to my life, otherwise I wouldn't be here. Existence doesn't mess around. There's deliberate consciousness and intent. Right, and now we have a lighter reality to hold right next to the denser reality or the negative reality. And in the light of your lighter understanding, your higher understanding, being more in alignment with your higher self, as you're looking at the negative belief, not getting wrapped up in the story, but just observing it, you can start to see it from all angles, and it starts to dissolve because it no longer seems relevant. As long as you see that the belief is silly, as soon as you see that, it starts to disappear and let go of you energetically. So the next time the circumstance happens, you're much more stable in consciousness. You're much more stable in your alignment and your sense of who you are.
Yes, that makes so much sense. So sort of to summarize that, so your beliefs, which obviously come from conditioning, are creating your thoughts, which are then creating the emotional reactions, which are acting as sort of this feedback system to let
Correct.
you know that you have a belief that it's out of alignment.
Yes.
And so your emotions are serving in that space. But it almost sounds like you said that we originally have a maybe like a subconscious strategy for holding on to the belief itself originally. So you were mentioning if I said that I'm unworthy, or if I believe that I'm unworthy, that was the result of maybe at a point my dad withheld love from me in a sense. And my reaction or response to that was, oh, I want to protect myself from feeling this way again. So maybe if I'm holding on to the belief, I protect myself from having to be vulnerable to somebody who can make me feel that way again. Do you think that that's originally where people are coming from? So people who are experiencing a lot of fear-based beliefs might have had a lot of traumatic experiences, or a lot of pain through conditioning. And so as a result of that, they hold on to these, tons and tons of beliefs thinking they're protecting themselves, but in reality, the inner reality, when you're ignoring the external reality, or you're realizing that it's just this illusion, those beliefs are no longer serving. They're sort of these outdated strategies over time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So I want to bring up something that sort of is a cousin to this conversation, which is the difference between happiness and fulfillment. So happiness in the sense of maybe traditional happiness, so pleasure-seeking and excitement, and maybe like the human version of happiness versus the being version of happiness, or the divine version of happiness, which is sort of the fulfillment aspect. And what I've personally noticed is, as somebody who came from a life where it was pleasure-seeking very early on, and sort of escaping, I guess, or trying to escape externally a lot of fear-based beliefs that I had at the time, when I sort of tapped into fulfillment through spirituality, I noticed that that eventually outgrew anything that pleasure-seeking type of happiness could stand next to. And if you could just describe a little bit of that difference, and maybe how to tap into each of those different types of happiness.
So there's different levels I can speak to here, depending on how absolute we want to go. But the only truly stable form of inner fulfillment that I have found to be is to be deeply aware of the truth of who one is unwaveringly. So this comes back to, like, how far do you want to take enlightenment? How tired are you of suffering? How ready are you to practice this non-stop, to become a different being, to become your true being, and to really shed any ties to the falseness that came upon you over time? And not many people are. Some people may say they are willing to do that, but not many people are, and that's okay. So, but I just want to say that I cannot confidently say that 100% complete fulfillment or happiness is possible without those. So, but that aside, given that that may not be relevant for the majority of the people listening or reading to this, if that's not an option, if that's not immediately on our menu, so to speak, then one step down from that would be to understand that we are either in a state of consuming or needing, or we are in a state of giving or creating. So you can sort of make two columns, and on the left side you can have the consuming column, and on the right side you can have the creating column. Now, if you think of any moment in your life when you are the most ecstatic, it is when you were shining, when you were beaming, when you were truly who you were, and you somehow landed for another being, or in your direct experience of your environment, somehow you were able to give and create something. You saw other people light up as a result of something you did, said, or radiated, right? So, but usually, since we have compounding lack beliefs, we come from a space of needing and protecting and trying to acquire security around us, even though we're going to die, which is the silliest thing if you think about it. We're trying to live our whole lives to acquire security around us, only to arrive safely at death, So it makes no sense. We have to become a little bit more brave and courageous and live in the moment and not think about the future so much, not protect our physical lives. Again, it's hard to do if we don't know that we're not the physical body. Neediness is going to creep in. That's why enlightenment is important, at least to some degree. Otherwise, the empowerment side will not be conducive. But, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add, I think society too has so much, like they say so many of our, well, almost all of our decisions we make, neuroscience has proven, for example, are emotional. So they're the why decisions. And society is sort of structured in the why acquire security, why be a consumer, why, and all of that is constantly being fed. And it almost doesn't give the average person it does when people, I think, suffer enough from that cycle, but it usually doesn't present the why, for living in the moment and being more courageous. And there's often not a lot of that being fueled or brought to light, and that's why I think it's really valid to put this in here today and make an effort of sharing that with we have a great audience of 5.5 million people. So the
Nice.
why for spirituality, so the why for making an effort to live in the moment and how it sort of serves.
Beautiful.
Sorry, I'll let you
Yes.
finish. I just interrupted.
Yeah, beautiful. So, again, if you think about it, whenever we're in consuming mode, which doesn't just mean you go to the grocery store, you buy something and you eat it. Okay, by consuming I mean energetically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, environmentally, anything. We're consuming using the way that we think. It's all about me. It's all about getting. It's all about gratification. Short, brief moments of gratification and relief are the best access we have to fulfillment or happiness when we're in a state of consuming. But genuine, true happiness or fulfillment always comes from giving. It always comes from creating, being in a state of creation, of creativity, of generosity, of overwhelm, of radiating. So how do we do that? First of all, we need to be really frank with ourselves and admit that we tend to come from a state of consuming. And that whenever we feel sort of like grouchy and like unhappy and like we need to pleasure ourselves in certain ways or gratify our senses in a certain way to feel good, we are coming from a complete state of thinking that we are needing or lacking something. And from that state, we become like this negative sucking black hole, and energetically speaking. And whatever we do, we're just going to consume energetically, no matter what we do.
And so where does learning fall in that? Is learning, so it almost seems like learning, I guess if you're learning from something external, it's not an internal process, so that's still under a state of consuming.
Oh, interesting. Well, yeah, it depends on what kind of learning we're talking about. If the learning comes from I need to be a lawyer because then Daddy will love me. So I need to study for 6 years and waste my life for someone else that don't really cares about me anyway. If that's what you want out of life, if you want to live for other people in that way and be afraid all your life, then yes, your learning is based on consuming. But if your philosophy is, I want to know more about my calling, I want to know more about my purpose and my sense of belonging to the universe, and how am I a unique expression of the all that is, and how do I have a quality of being that's unique that other people could benefit from? How can I give and share love and be of service? If that's the question you're coming from, then whatever you're learning along the way of that energy, of that attitude, will naturally add to your ability to give and create. So then I wouldn't classify that as consuming. I would classify that as acting on your highest passion and excitement in each moment that you can, following that breadcrumb trail of what excites me the most now, and what feels the best now, and what's the most inspiring now, and how can I give most of myself. And giving includes, or creating, the state of creating includes creating environments and experiences and opportunities for yourself where you can grow as a being, where you can be more enlivened and enlightened and awakened and empowered. So creating includes naturally the self. But when we are creating and giving to other selves, we can't help but uplift ourselves and learn and grow. So from that state, it would definitely be classified as creating or fulfillment rather than gratification.
It's almost like what the emotion or the motive is that's sponsoring which type of learning you're doing. So if you're learning based on fear, you're learning because you're afraid if I don't become a lawyer and don't learn, then I won't receive my father's love. Versus if you're learning based on love, where you're inspired and it's authentic, then from that space you're doing something that's empowering yourself and others, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Okay, so I have heard more recently, and this is something I have no personal opinion on, but I'm very interested, that I've heard a lot of spiritual teachers say that we're sort of experiencing, let's say within the field, we're passing through, based on where we are, actual like webs of thought. And so sometimes when we're having thoughts, and I've spent personally a lot of time being very aware of my thoughts and challenging and questioning things and where they're coming from. And
Thank
I
you.
haven't had this experience, but I've heard things like, oh, we pick up thoughts and we think that they're our thoughts, but they're actually the thoughts from around us. And I was
Yeah.
wondering what your perspective is on that, because it really sort of boggled my mind a little bit.
Beautiful. I love that question. And I love the entranceway into this exploration, because I always love to be able to return to a more absolute statement. And I will say that 100% of our thoughts are not our own.
Wow.
If you think about it, you didn't have any thoughts when you came in. There is no original thought. There's an original intent. There's an original blueprint that gave birth to this body, because without an intent, which is energetic, you can visualize this as an energetic blueprint. It's a very complex phenomena of energy patterns and wavelengths, which basically pre-birth gives rise to this intention and creates a body and a situation that is conducive to becoming this expression in the world or learning a particular lesson. So there's an intent behind who you are. Now, if we are able to consciously line up with that original intent, that calling of why we are here, then the thoughts that will attract to ourselves will be in alignment with that. So we could call that more original ideas. But if you think about it, before you had any words in your mind, before you had learned any language, what was your experience of yourself? When you were old enough to be aware of the fact that you existed, yet you were too young to have a vocabulary in your mind through which to filter your experience.
What was my personal experience of myself?
Yeah, as a being.
Example, I remember being a really loving and sensitive child. I was very, like...
Okay, but those are words. Go back even further.
What was the experience?
What was your
It was
actual
awareness,
direct
really,
experience?
right?
There you go. Yes. So we came into this world just being like pure awareness, aware of existing, but having no words to describe me or mine or this or that or need or lack. Before we learned any type of words or concepts, we still existed. That was the original purity, and we still had the original intent of our birth beating as our very own hearts, and it would give us in life this guidance system to which to realign to all the time using the emotions. But if you think about it, pretty much any thought you have in your mind today, it's picked up somewhere. You didn't just come up with it when you were 2 years old. Sometimes I say, whatever you didn't come up with when you were 2 years old is not yours. It's not originally yours. Now, if we want to take this to the absolute level, we can say, we can question if we need thought to operate. And the assumption is that we need verbal thinking in order to be able to operate and function. But I found that to be a myth. Without thoughts, we can still operate. Without thoughts, we still are. And without thoughts, we can still contemplate. We can still think and assess a situation. There's an intelligence that takes over, that's higher, much more flawless, much more synchronized with everything and every event, that the personal mind simply cannot comprehend. It's intuitive, contemplative, meditative mind using higher intelligence that knows everything that's happening all at once, anywhere, anytime, any space, any dimension. And you're tapping into that intelligence by simply, in a sense, stepping back and clearing yourself of all identification with thought. And from that state, you can experience your original self pretty much all the time. And from that state, you can still act and operate in the world, but it will be effortless, it will be joyful, it will be beautiful.
Wow. So how would you say, what is advice for getting there? Is it challenging and questioning the thoughts? Or is that still just another mode of thinking itself? Is it following the feelings and what just...
Ultimately, all of these techniques are only going to offer relative freedom, which is great, because I mean, that's what our world needs and what it's ready for. It wants more freedom within the realm of me. But ultimately, if you want to, again, take this all the way, to get there, as you state, We need to not investigate the thoughts, just the thoughts. We need to investigate who it is that's having the thoughts. And we'll find out that who it is that's having the thoughts is itself a thought. And when we can notice and release that thought, the core fundamental assumption that I am someone. At first, that's how it shows up. It's, oh wait, I am somebody. Because we're always externalizing, we're always looking at objects and thoughts and assessing situations, and we feel things based on that. But if you think about it, the only way for us to do that and to have any kind of definition of the outside world or how we feel, there must be an assumption that all these things apply to me or affect me.
You give yourself an identity in that process, right?
Yes, and we don't know we're doing it. If we don't see that we believe that we are somebody, we're identified with it. It's in the back of our minds, but we can't see it. We're just externalizing. Yes. But we can actually bring awareness back into ourselves and ask ourselves, who am I? Who is it that this whole world seems to pertain to and happen to? Who is it that's the victim of all thoughts and perceptions? And if we can bring clear awareness to this, clearly and persistently enough, something magical starts to happen. And the whole me thought starts to actually dissolve. And what remains is that same state, but even clearer as when you were 2 years old, just aware of being with no words. And you can learn to operate from this, and now you're truly in a state of indescribable peace, and this becomes so blissful.
Wow. And when you relearn how to operate from that state,
you don't have to. You just need to learn to sort of rest as that state. You need to learn to not be the false state, because you already are the true self that's looking through your eyes, that's looking through these concepts, but it's clouded. So if you turn around, turn awareness onto yourself, stop externalizing, and ask yourself, who is it that's feeling this way? Who is it that believes that they are unworthy? Instead of just looking at the unworthy beliefs and where they come from, which is helpful, it's relative freedom. But more absolute freedom is, wait a second, in order for me to even play this game seriously and take my beliefs seriously, I must assume that I am something. Let's look at that assumption, because that's the core I thought behind constituting every other thought. I'm so busy in my mind because I believe that I am. Well, what is that I am that I think I am? And when you turn within, you can start to see that there's nothing but vast, lucid, awake space, and that this whole experience is actually a dream. And you don't need to relearn how to operate from this. Not really. It takes some adjusting. It takes some trusting, most of all.
yes.
But when you are anchored in that state, everything happens effortlessly. You don't need to relearn anything, because what happens is you give the things that were never part of your job description back to, call it God or life or higher self or source. So the things that you weren't ever supposed to be dealing with anyway, which is why we feel so burdened and burned out, and like we have this heavy backpack of responsibilities that we're carrying all our lives. When you realize that that's a false assumption, that you need to do all that and figure out how and when things are going to happen for you, how you're going to change things, and when it's going to happen. When you release the how and the when, you are naturally rested in this pristine, blissful space of here and now connection to your true self. You're being your true self. And then the higher intelligence which took care of you when you were younger, and which is taking care of everything, and the plants and the trees and the animals and the higher densities of this cosmic play, it just sort of happens through you. And you are a blissful witness to it. And when it resonates, you just know when to act, when to use the body, when to speak something, when to act in a certain way. It just knows. It's just intuitive and natural.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. So when we hear things, let's say the average person, when you hear things like flow state, would you say that flow state, for example, that you hear about in psychology, is something that where you're almost this conduit that you're talking about, in a sense, because in that state you sort of lose the sense of ego?
Correct. Yes. It's very much like flow state, but it's a flow state that doesn't need to be induced by a circumstance or activity.
Yes.
When we master it, right? When we actually use contemplation to realize this state, which is the flow state, which is the natural state, when we simply give up awareness of everything that's not our true selves, we start to naturally abide in that flow state. And it's the same thing, just induced in a different way, more deliberately.
Wow. I think that's a really, really great insight to share with people, because that's something
Oh,
that
yes.
the average person can sort of access from that stuff.
Nice. Yes.
I personally have this experience where, so I work with a lot of people one-on-one, and I'll sort of work with people back to back to back, probably because like I'm trying to harness this space. I sort of get into this flow-like state. But then at the end of the day, when I'm out of it, or when my day is over, I have this like feeling of crash, like this feeling of like, oh, I'm back here now, and I almost feel like I have to come back into my body in a sense, and then it's weird for a little bit, and I and I never know what to make of it. I go through this internal process, and you hear this so often in people who are going through, anxiety or depression or creating change. You hear all about boundaries. And it's sort of this ongoing thing I struggle with personally, because it's like, well, when I don't have any sense of boundaries for that, 7-8 hour period straight, in a sense, I forget about eating. I forget, everything's just sort of in this space. And then I come back, and then I feel almost like
hyper-physical.
I'm not sure how to explain it. And so I always go with, am I supposed to be setting better boundaries so that I don't wear myself out? Or is the feeling of being worn out just relative to the state I was just in? And what would you say for people, especially people who are giving and people who are the empaths and who are always, or usually in that state of giving, but then they're supposed to be working on their boundary issues? Where is the healthy space, or I guess...
Oh man, this is so tricky to answer, because it really is a case-by-case situation.
Okay.
So, but I can give a couple of general outlines so people can see if this applies to them.
Fantastic.
Because at a certain stage, yes, it's helpful to call it set boundaries, or I would say just be decisive in and confident in what you feel is true for you in that moment. I don't really like the idea of boundaries. I just, learn to say no or go elsewhere when it doesn't feel like it's serving you to be in a certain place or time. So it's not about setting boundaries like shielding yourself. It's just about knowing who you are, knowing what resonates for you, and giving yourself the free voice, in a sense opening the blue ray throat chakra, if you will, like balancing that out and feeling worthy and empowered enough. That's usually what it comes down to. Feeling worthy enough to, without any violence or agitation, just state your truth. This center of energy or consciousness is the first center where we actually learn to express ourselves without it being a reaction to anyone else. It's actually coming from our connection to self. If you want to think in terms of the energy centers, everything below that, it's still in response to our environment. But when we come to freely express who we are, which is the throat chakra center, is oriented in that way, then this is our connection to our true self, and this is us expressing who we are without any reason for it. This is just us free-flowing from higher self into this world. Now, this is a very free state to be in, and this feels very empowering, because now we don't have this issue so much of what to say, when to say, how will it land for people, and it will come, when this is integrated and balanced, it will come with great love and understanding.
Yes.
So to be able to be worthy enough, to feel worthy enough, to know that you are worthy enough in the eyes of creation, in the eyes of existence, in the eyes of consciousness, in the eyes of God, in the eyes of source, whatever you want to call it, intelligence, to feel that it doesn't matter what anyone says about your worth. You are intrinsically, by the very fact that you are, that you exist, you are intrinsically worthy to be, otherwise you would not exist. Therefore, whatever resonates for you, you are free to state, express, decide, choose, etc., without having to make concessions on that. And you can do this in a loving, kind way, also without making concessions on who you are. You don't have to linger around too long, hear their explanations of why that's not probable or possible or whatever. You can just state what is true for you lovingly and walk away. So yes, for certain people and certain times, this is definitely a relevant stage to go through.
I love what you said, though, where it's not about a boundary. It's just about honoring your worth enough to express what's true for you. Like,
there you go.
Because
beautiful.
There's so many things, like the boundaries, set boundaries, And I work with people who I say that to sometimes, like, you have to be able to set a boundary there, or things like that, but it never resonated with me fully.
Nice. There you go.
That made a lot of sense. So that's a
Yeah, you just need
fantastic.
to look, what is the belief that doesn't allow me to feel empowered to choose what I want to choose? What makes me doubt myself? What makes me feel like, yeah, I can't do this because it will hurt someone else's feelings? If you clear up these beliefs, you are now able to freely express yourself. And there's no question of boundaries. Why would you ever want to limit yourself by limiting others?
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
You can easily say, well, this is not what I want right now, so please, leave, or I'll leave, or whatever. But yeah, boundaries is a limiting idea.
And
But when this, yeah?
go ahead, go ahead.
Well, when you get past that stage, when you're used to that more and more, and you're actually a free expresser, and you feel worthy to express yourself and to make your own choices, and it's balanced itself out, it's no longer a reaction to the outside world. It is now mostly coming from within, from your clarity and empowerment and confidence that you are worthy to be who you are, and you trust your resonance, trust your intuition.
Trust your
When,
resonance. I like that.
nice. So when you get past that stage, or when you've integrated that level, now the next stage would be to see that nothing can actually ever affect you except your own thinking. So this makes you even more powerful, because now you can be in a situation which feels horrible and you can be completely okay with it. And if you get past that stage, you can even find absolute bliss in situations you would previously feel you had to shield yourself from or walk away from. And now you can actually be in that space and maintain your bliss, because you have looked deeply enough into the assumption of who you are, and you've looked deeply enough into the illusory nature of thoughts and how they create how you feel, that you are established in consciousness. You have achieved mastery enough to where ultimately it doesn't matter who you're with, what they say, what they do. Now, you can still choose to not be in certain situations all the time, but when they do occur spontaneously, you also don't feel the need to avoid them or replace them. You can actually bring the fullness of spirit to that, and now you can be an alchemist, an energetic alchemist, and the energy and presence and establishment and consciousness and your true frequency that you bring to the equation in that space. You only have to be there and things will change. You only have to be there and the process alters itself. If you're established in this enough, you don't need to do anything to change the situation. Just your very presence alone will upgrade and transmute the entire situation. So now, instead of hiding yourself or walking away from non-resonant situations, you simply make everything a resonant situation by the fact that you are there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, okay, so what about to somebody who maybe is new to, because we will have an audience that is a little bit new to some of these amazing concepts. So what about somebody who they're in pain a little bit? Is it fair to say to that person, pain is there at least as your teacher, and it's there to sort of alert you to the things that are not in resonance, so that maybe in the early stages you can walk away and express your truth, and then that's something you evolve into as time goes on?
Beautiful, yes. Pain of any kind is an indication of out of alignment thinking or feeling, ultimately. So, and it starts as mental pain, or sometimes even spiritual pain. It starts as mental pain usually, and then it becomes emotional pain quite immediately, because these two are interacting all the time. Your emotional guidance will let you know that you're mentally like churning and out of alignment, not completely clear. If this is not paid attention to for long enough, it will become physical. So most any physical ailment is actually the crystallization of mental emotional pain that hasn't been dealt with soon enough.
Yeah.
So like you said, it is indeed the teacher, it's the reflection, it's the mirror we stare into. And if we stop externalizing the causes for it, yeah, I feel bad or I'm in pain because this happened to my body, when you completely miss the point. Like, yeah, I had an accident, that's why I feel this way. No, you had an accident, why? Because you didn't pay attention to what was going on in your mental body and emotional body. Therefore, higher self had to make it physical to grab your attention. And even now that it has done that, even now you're not paying attention. You still think it's the cause of an externalized reality which does not exist. Look into quantum science if you don't believe it. It doesn't exist. It's completely self-created. So we're in this constant state of subjective victimization, feeling like we're at the whim of this objective reality which does not exist. So we need to take teachers' pain, indeed, very well. So then what do? We ask ourselves, well, what must I believe is true in order to have generated this? What is this showing me? Does it want me to slow down and contemplate? If so, do it. Go and meditate. Be by yourself. Contemplate. Just rest with the experience of having the illness or having broken your leg or whatever the pain is. Rest, relax, and allow it intuitively to clear for you, make clear for you what is the underlying mental emotional cause or belief system causing that. And this is fairly easy. It requires some dedication. It requires you to actually take time to yourself and stop externalizing yourself. But everyone can do this. Everyone is much more intuitive and clear and awake than they realize. All they need is to offer themselves some space to rest the mind, relax, come into the silence of the present moment, and any investigation or question offered into that space, while maintaining that space, will be answered very clearly for pretty much anyone.
And so you said something a minute ago. You said your higher self. So you were talking about accidents, and sometimes this conversation will come up with other people I know, with other coworkers at CE, and it's sort of like, yeah, we can create our own illness, of course. There's enough science out there that demonstrates that, or things like Gabor Mate's work, for example. But it's like, oh, but how does that apply if you trip and stub your toe, or a car hits you, or something like that, and it's not your seeming fault? And what you just said, I think, really clarified that, which is that it's your higher self actually, helping to get your attention.
Yes. Yes, every type of pain basically is your higher self trying to say, wake up, pay attention, wake up.
Yeah.
Course correct, realign, take a moment, contemplate, realign.
Absolutely, that's beautiful. Okay, so what would you say to somebody who, let's say, they believe a lot in the law of attraction, and law of attraction is, when we talk about things like vibrational reality and how we're attracting things based on what our vibration and our frequency signature is at any given time, what would you say to somebody who seems to try to do things over and over again, but doesn't seem to be able to get the results they're looking for? Is it possible that we're not just attracting consciously, but also subconsciously? And maybe if we are attracting something like, I want more money, or I want to be more abundant, but then you have all these limiting beliefs subconsciously that you're holding on to, like, I am unworthy of money, I am unworthy of abundance, then is it possible that that's sort of where that's coming from, and what can we do with that?
You could almost say there's three levels operating at any given moment. There's the conscious mind, which thinks and intends, and it's sort of the ego mind that thinks it knows what it wants, and it thinks it knows what is relevant for itself, and it thinks it knows what is best, but usually doesn't. So there's the conscious mind, and then we could, let's just say, the subconscious or unconscious mind, which is what you were referring to, and then there is the higher conscious, which is, you could call it superconscious or higher mind. And this higher mind, its duty, it's your non-physical counterpart. Each life, each physical incarnation has a physical consciousness or physically oriented consciousness, and a non-physically higher mind oriented consciousness. The higher mind has the ability to perceive multiple parallel realities, probabilities, future, past. So it's like looking at you, the physical body, sort of like trying to find its way up the mountaintop, but it's already there. It can see the direct path. It can see what serves you, what doesn't serve you, where there's a boulder in the way, where there isn't. And sometimes from the physical point of view, what seems to be the quickest way to happiness is, well, if I have $10 million, then I'd be happy, right? But the higher mind sees that, well, wait a second, if you're granted $10 million, what you're going to do based on your mental composition at this moment, based on your belief systems, based on your subconscious mind, you're actually going to take that money and use it for this, and you're going to feel this way, and you're going to off-put a lot of people in this way, or you're going to be consuming in this way, and you're going to be actually walking down the mountain, thinking you're walking up the mountain. And then you're going to hit a dark place in your life that is harder to return from than right now not getting what you think you want. So you have to take into consideration not only what you want, but what's relevant for you. And yes, there is the necessity to clean up the subconscious beliefs as much as you can, but also trust in the higher conscious or the higher mind, that it guides you at any moment to what's best for you. If we get greedy and if we use law of attraction from a consumerism point of view, it's going to, it's going to bite us in the bum at some point. So, but it's perfect to use that, because when we're using law of attraction that way, it's the perfect way for us to reveal our frustrations and our egoic mind and our limiting beliefs and what we think we want and our insistence and our stubbornness. It's all going to be shown, because what isn't meant to happen will not happen, try as you may. If you're not ready for it, if it's not relevant for you, if it's not in your true higher interest, you will not be able to manifest it. Don't worry. You can try, but you will fail, and you will see yourself, and you will face yourself on that road, on that path. So it's an appealing, it's something that appeals to a lot of people, because from the consumerism state of feeling like we're lacking, it's like, whoa, law of attraction. Okay, now I can consume as much as I want, and I can consume exactly what I want, because my thoughts create my reality. Well, you're in for quite a treat.
That's very cool, and that's a very good way of looking at it, because you hear this so often in spiritual communities where law of attraction's not working for me, and my original thought was, oh, it's because there's subconscious stuff that's there that has to be worked out, but it makes so much more sense that there's the higher self that's actually operating there for you, especially because for me, and I'm sure for so many people who will hear this and can relate to this, it's like sometimes we plan things and we think we have this concrete plan, and all of a sudden everything just falls away, everything changes, and it's like, man plans, God laughs, and it's so true, right? So that's a perfect sort of piece of evidence that our higher self is really the one in charge. So okay, so
well, we do have, just to be clear, from this state of being, we do have free will to a relative extent. And we can definitely utilize that, and how we respond to our circumstances and what we choose is up to us. But the guidance and the context and the container that's provided for that, and the signals and the roadblocks and the intuitions that are provided for that are held in view by a higher consciousness. And the quicker or the less stubborn we are, the more we trust that and align to that, the more our lives can actually be in a flow state, and we'll get everything that we need or truly desire. It's taken care of. We don't need to actively go out and attract it. We just need to allow it. We just need to be in a state of flow, of trusting our higher selves, not trying to consume everything because we believe we're lacking something now. Find fulfillment now. Create and give of your radiance now. You can always make somebody happy in a certain way without needing anything from that. Just by being you can share that happiness, and that can amplify your happiness. You can be in the flow state. It's very easy to get into the flow state. There's so many ways to do it. You just need to get out of your neediness mind. You just need to realize you already are everything you want. Compare your life to someone that has much less than you, and you realize, like, what am I thinking? I'm so, like, I am grateful. I'm grateful for everything. Like, 10 years ago, I wanted all these things, and now I have 9 out of 10 of these things. Like, and I'm not even noticing them. Yes, I'm a greedy.
Future and more and what's next.
Yeah, I'm a greedy bastard. Like, I never stop and actually connect to what's true. Like, I've become a fake human being. I've become just running around this rat race. And I don't even appreciate the fact that there's billions of cellular intelligences cooperating in order for me to walk from here to my fridge whenever I want to. Like, I'm creating my reality all the time. Let's appreciate for a second before we start consuming more.
Absolutely. And when you get so stuck in the future, or even people who are living very much in the past, it's like you don't get to appreciate life at all, because you're always sort of split in where your energy is.
Yeah.
Now, you just said something about flow state. And automatically tapping into flow state. We're a little short on time. I don't want to keep you for too long, but
that's okay.
Was this sort of an entrance for you? Like, what was your process? Because I know you are 28 years old, correct? And
tomorrow I turn 29. Yeah.
Oh, happy birthday!
Thanks.
Fantastic. So you're in this space where you've entered into this. Very young, and I think a lot more people are sort of entering into this from a young age, and into this sort of spiritual path. How did this come about for you, and what was your early experience?
I've been a very intense seeker of truth. I've been exposed to some of the spiritual, sort of mainstream spiritual ideas, like Silva mind control, when I was very young, like 9, 10, 11 years old. It started. like basic meditation techniques, use the subconscious mind, alpha wave frequencies, The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, that kind of stuff, you know, sort of accessible, digestible spirituality. So that was part of my, it was part of my upbringing to an extent, at least. And I always had this inner sense even before that, like everything is possible. I just knew someday I would turn into Superman. I knew it for sure. Like I would turn into Superman, like everything is possible. So I always had this natural sense of there's something not quite right about believing that this is it, that we are limited by what we see. So that got dulled down a lot. That got clouded and obscured when I became maybe 12 years old, went to high school. So for a period of 3 or 4 years or so, I started to become dimmer and duller, and I didn't notice it just crept into my system.
Over time. Yep.
Yeah, and like it does with so many kids, you know. And I was lucky enough to have enough of remembrance and a spark within my consciousness, my you know, and be able to notice that at a certain age, I stopped myself and I was like, wait a second, I used to be so much happier, so much more natural, so much more believing everything is possible, and now I've taken on reality, the burden of realism and the burden of other people and what they think of me and trying to fit in and trying to like be somebody. I do not feel good, and I don't care if I'm delusional by going back to that previous state. I'm not going to accept this because it felt so much more true when I was 10 years old than I feel now being 14, 15 years old. So it was a big breakthrough time for me as a teenager, where I sort of reclaimed my power to come back to my natural self. But not only that, I started getting into practicing telekinesis for a while, which is moving objects without touching them, because that was one of the representations my mind had of everything is possible. So I started learning about this, and I started practicing this with some success. And after about 6 months of practicing this, at some point I realized, like, well, this is cool. This is a great confirmation that everything is possible and that I'm not ultimately physical. But what's the purpose behind it? Like, am I going to train for another 10 years only, you know, to be able to move a chair around? And then what? Like, what's the purpose behind that? So I realized that in order to truly have a breakthrough and truly master any aspect of life, I had to first know the source of life. I just had this intuitive inkling. This thought came to me, wait a second. If I want to master anything, I need to know the source of everything. So I started to dig into the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. This was when I was 15 or 16 years old. Materials such as the Law of One, that kind of sort of enlightenment work, a lot of Osho stuff I was engaged with, reading, studying. So, and more I can't remember right now, but a lot of books along those lines of seeking enlightenment, sort of the masculine path a little bit, like the yogic path, you know, of penance and control and discipline. Yes. Even though I had a very undisciplined mind, so this was always a challenge for me, which actually forced me to find the quickest, easiest route possible for myself and for average humanity, because I didn't really have discipline, but I had strong, earnest devotion and dedication to the result.
Inspiration, yeah.
Yeah, so how do you combine that when those books suggest you have to be super disciplined, when you just want to know the truth instantly and you want to be free now, and you don't believe that you have to go through 10, 20, 30 years of meditation in a certain way and repeat a certain mantra to get somewhere. No, it must be more natural than that. So I was sort of rebelling against my teachers at the time, and just continuing to seek what resonates, what doesn't resonate. I went to India for half a year after high school. Spent time with teachers there, just studying, contemplating, reading. And that's where I really did have my first, I would say, enlightenment, awakening, where before that time I could already access sort of the state of awareness itself, but it was more momentary, and I believed that I had to be a certain way, I had to control my mind in a certain way for that to be here. But then I realized, wait a second, this is always already here. I am always already aware, and that's really where my identity shift started, from being a person needing to maintain a certain state of mind to be in a certain state of awareness. Yeah, to realizing, wait a second, I am the awareness that's always here, and I'm actually aware of the body forgetting and remembering me. even when I forget to recognize that I'm awareness, awareness is aware even of that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, how would I remember that I forgot?
Yeah.
So awareness is always here. That was a great relief, because I've been seeking for maybe 4 or so years with great intensity, and like driving myself nuts and crazy, and getting depressed and all kinds of things.
So it sort of allows you to surrender into it as opposed to be seeking still
Yeah.
outside of yourself in a sense.
Yes, yes. And after that, I mean, it just cascaded into all kinds of realizations. So my whole view and experience of it became much more comprehensive and holistic. But I've always had this intention to keep it as simple as possible, so that it's accessible to the average Joe, because I always thought it was so unfair. Like when I had these experiences or these realizations and these perspective shifts, I was like, this is not fair. Like the amount of effort that I had to put into this, it's not fair towards humanity, because they're not going to do this. They're not going to stop their lives and do this. There has to be another way. So I started to distill what I believe works for the majority of people and leave out what doesn't work. And yeah, truth be told, it may not be the deepest, most profound realizations that can transfer completely through that. It's a pacified version of spirituality that's nevertheless very clear and direct and accessible, that people can use to really wake up to a great extent. And if they want more, they can always go deeper. If they don't want more, they can use that level of clarity to empower themselves in the world at whatever level they're at. But at least, we've given them tools. So that's when I created True Infinity Academy, which is now free, so everyone can access it.
Wow.
Just to have an accessible pathway for just about anyone to go through these lessons step by step by step, and come out at the other end being like awake and empowered. But now personally, my own journey, I really feel like I've done my job in that way, and I'm now allowed to retire, which doesn't mean I'll stop teaching, but it means that I'm allowing myself to fully be absorbed by the bliss of the one infinite creator, to really go into the absolute state, or the statelessness, and disappear in terms of being a person or mind altogether. So that's what's been happening more recently, which feels amazing. It just feels like homecoming to me. Like finally I'm allowing myself, now that I've done the job I wanted to do, I'm finally allowing myself to fully drop into this. And as a result, I feel inspired to share this with people. It's just inevitable. So.
Absolutely, because it's coming from sort of beyond you in a sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what are your plans going forward? Just continuing to sort of follow that trail of just dropping in and seeing what happens, or what is a message that you really want to share with people specifically?
I mean, there's so many videos and there's so many things I've already said. I'm kind of tired of words in a way.
Wow.
And it's just, I don't know, I've already left everything I want to leave to the majority of people. What I want to move into now is really the pure ancient way, so to speak, of beingness and being together and sharing the radiance of union, of non-duality, of the truth of the one infinite being, and letting that radiate out into as many people as possible and having them drop into that. It's not for everyone, but that's okay. And it will hold a radiance, and it will hold a field of awareness and enlightenment for the rest of humanity that inevitably has an impact. I'm probably going to move to Sedona for the foreseeable future, and I'm starting weekly or multiple meetings a week there. We're just going to be together and be in the space, and I'm going to be teaching more directly how to go more absolute in one's practice, to really profoundly make an identity shift, first from the person to consciousness, and then even from consciousness. Consciousness starts to become everything, so it's kind of like the God state, where there's union and inseparability of all experiences with who you are. You're no longer the person, you're no longer localized, you're everythingness. And then beyond that, when that is seen to also be an illusion, what remains is the one absolute, which is absolutely indescribable. It's beyond even creation. So this is what I want to share with those who are ready for that. And it includes everything about creation and consciousness. Consciousness is still available. As you see, I'm speaking with you here. And I'll continue to be speaking to some extent. But it's no longer identified with. It's a vehicle. It's like on the distance of my horizon, on the vastness of the infinite, this thing called experience or I amness or everythingness or consciousness or creation appears.
Wow. Wow. So when you first wake up in the morning, do you experience yourself as being here, or do you experience your entire surroundings as being part of who you, not who you are, because I know you're way beyond that, but do you feel like you're living from your body's state?
Most of the time, no.
Wow.
No.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah, the idea that I'm the body has been dropped quite some time ago, but it's been dropping even deeper lately. And even during sleep, I wouldn't call it aware, but somehow there's comprehension of being while my body is asleep. So when I wake up, it's more of a continuation from when I fall asleep. I don't completely fall asleep anymore. And when I wake up, it's not that big of a difference. It's just the world returns into view, but the consciousness or beingness was there regardless.
Wow. Maybe I hope one day I'm in that space.
You actually already are. It's
Yeah.
because you're identified with a more personalized aspect of you, which is the conscious mind that falls asleep. And it's the conscious mind that wakes up. But you exist nonetheless. There's something about you that knows you had a really good sleep when you're in deep sleep. So something remains. There's an essence of beingness that remains. And beyond that, the absolute is always timeless anyway. So when you start to get into those deeper levels of consciousness and become more integrated and familiar with that, you'll find that sleep becomes less and less of a sort of disappearing completely, and it starts to gradually sort of become a more, just another appearance. Oh, now the body is sleeping. Now there is no perception of form, but still I am.
What do you think is the fastest tool to, I guess it's fastest is still, I'm going to take notes for anything you want me to mention before we finish up, but do you, just personally for a moment, do you have a special or favorite technique for this process that you're describing?
For this process that I've just been describing?
Is it just meditation? Is it, what do you use on a daily basis?
Since I've allowed myself to fully start to face into this completely, and I'm basically giving up everything that's human about myself, every attachment, every assumption that I needed to facilitate a certain type of work within the world of people. I'm completely allowing that all to disappear, and a lot of it has gone already. It's very liberating. But it does require one to be ready, because it literally means giving up everything, everything you associate with everything. Like, you don't even know what that means until you start the process. Like the most subtle assumptions that you have to investigate and see, well, am I ready to let this go? Yep. And the more you do that, the more absolute you become, and the more unaffected you become. Nothing can affect you anymore. But so the process I would describe, since I've been doing this more, I've been just like channeling sutras that at some point I'll publish, like very direct pointers. They're very direct methods for people to realize this themselves, those who want this, those who are ready for this. But I can give you some snippets. One method would be, step one would be, notice that you're seeing things and form, but stop identifying with forms. So things come and go, and it has certain shapes and sizes, and you have labels about what you see, but stop identifying with what you see. When you do this for a moment, you'll notice you'll become more aware of seeing itself. Like suddenly you notice, I am seeing, instead of being externalized in form. Do you notice that?
Yes. There's this quote. It's an Alan Watts thing, and he says, food is to, or a menu is to food like thoughts are to reality. It's like you can't eat the menu. It's like you are experiencing reality through thoughts. And so I'll often practice this. I'm not sure if it's the same thing, but just looking without naming, without objectifying anything, or without saying, computer, glass of water, and actually just looking and seeing things beyond the concept of them, in a sense.
Nice. Yeah, and then one becomes, it's like awareness starts to become aware of itself. You are now aware of the fact that you are seeing. That becomes more emphasized, because you're not as clouded by all the forms and externalization. So that's the first step. You stop identifying with what you see, so that awareness of seeing itself can arise.
Wow. Okay.
That's a very clear state. You could call that a state of enlightenment. The second step would be don't identify with seeing. If you step back from seeing, what happens is awareness goes even deeper, and all that remains is awareness of being. Without form, without body, just beingness.
Yes, that makes sense to me.
The third and final step is, do not identify with being. And mostly people go, wait, what? But it's possible. It's not for everyone, but it's possible. If you maintain comprehension of being long enough without identifying with it, a certain distance is created between the essence of everything, which is beingness, I amness, presence, consciousness, whatever you want to call it. But if you can hold that in view long enough and see that actually I'm not even that, a shift can happen where it's like all experience, it's not like it disappears, it's available, but it has no effect on you whatsoever. Like you can't even feel creation. You don't even feel beingness, which sounds kind of cold maybe, but it's the most amazing, mind-blowing perfection you've ever known, and it's beyond experiences as you know it. It's beyond consciousness as you know it. And now it's like you're looking into creation from outside of creation. This is like silence beyond silence. Like if you achieve silence of consciousness and you are able to be totally present and you enjoy the silence of being, imagine the absence of even that.
Wow.
It's like at some point even being becomes noisy to the absolute.
Wow.
And you can realize that even aware beingness is not who you absolutely are. There'd be one method into it.
That's very profound. I do a meditation sometimes where I'll imagine that my body starts to dissolve into awareness around me, and then everything sort of dissipates into one awareness of like this little sea of being.
Nice.
But I can't imagine going a step further yet. So what you're saying, where then you imagine getting rid of that feeling, that's incredible. I'm going to try that somehow.
Cool, yes.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you, that's beautiful.
Pleasure. My joy.
So for when we do the intro and the finale, is there anything you want to share? Anything you want us to share on behalf of you? Anything? Because we'll put together something really nice. But personally, I'm like, I had watched a few of your videos this week. We've reached out to a bunch of different people for the podcast in the next little while. And I'm so impressed just with the level of authenticity and the level of, I've met and spoken with a lot of different people over the past 2 years, and you hear things about, you know, different variations of different teachings, and I really resonate with what you said, and I think it's important to be shared, especially for people who are really seeking. Because there's all sorts of information, and I have a great feeling about this. So anything you want to share on your behalf with everybody when we do an intro?
Really depends where people are at, what they desire, but in general I would suggest the free resource, trinfinityacademy.com. So that is basically infinity with a T and an R in front of it. It's not trifinity or trinity.
Okay.
It's trinfinityacademy.com. And it's got both paths. It's got the path of empowerment or self-actualization, and it's got the path of enlightenment or self-realization.
Wow, I like that you set it up that way.
And so people can go through either course. All the lessons are freely accessible, so they can skip to what they want to, but I would suggest, in general, sort of go through it step by step, because it has an order to it that is deliberately created in that way. And I mean, that's a great resource, honestly, for people to get to really profound states and really need everything they need as a human being ever is in there.
So you've designed
in my opinion.
And so you've designed this for people where literally you can start at anywhere, essentially, wherever you're at in your spiritual journey. But you advise going step by step because you have all these sort of gems in here that are really beneficial to people who are seeking.
Yeah, so unless people are really advanced already in their awareness and practice of awakening, enlightenment, empowerment, then they can sort of just skip around the lessons, and you can still do that, occasionally or whatever. But for the most people, I would recommend just start at the beginning. Start at Enlightenment 1, follow it, then choose to go to Empowerment 1 or go to Enlightenment 2, whatever resonates. But yeah, it's a fairly complete course. I mean, it's pretty comprehensive. It can take you pretty much from anywhere to wherever you want to be.